forest was silent except for the crackle of broken branches under the human's boots. The man had been walking for hours, searching for shelter before nightfall. The trees were tall, their twisted shapes blocking the fading sunlight. Every step made him feel like unseen eyes were watching him. The ruins of stone walls and broken huts appeared through the fog, hinting that a village once stood here, but now only shadows remained. He stopped near the largest stone, setting down his bag. "This place will do," he whispered to himself. He pulled out a small lantern and lit it, the warm glow pushing the darkness back. As he settled near the ruined wall, a low sound reached his ears. It wasn't the wind and it wasn't the rustle of leaves, it was a growl, deep and sharp, echoing from the shadows. The man froze, his hand going to the knife on his belt. His eyes scanned the darkness. Then he saw them, two glowing eyes staring at him from the bushes. The growl grew louder, shaking with anger. "Leave, human!" A small voice hissed from the shadows. The words were rough, yet strangely soft at the same time. He didn't move, only lifted the lantern higher. From the darkness stepped out a tiny figure. She looked part human, part beast, her ears sharp, her claws thin but deadly. Her hair was wild, falling around her glowing eyes, her teeth showed as she bared her fangs. The man tensed, but he didn't strike. She stood only to his chest in height, her body trembling though she tried to look fierce. Her tail lashed behind her and her small chest heaved with heavy breaths. "Leave now, or I'll tear you apart," she growled. But as the lantern light fell on her face, the man noticed something strange. Her cheeks were flushed a deep red. It wasn't just anger, she was blushing. For a moment, silence filled the air. The man tilted his head, his fear turning into curiosity. He had seen many creatures during his travels, but never one that growled and blushed at the same time. "You don't want me here?" he asked calmly, his voice steady. The girl's claws tightened, her ears twitching. She snapped back, "No human is welcome. Go away." Yet her voice cracked as she spoke, betraying her fear. The man slowly sat down again, keeping the lantern between them. "If you wanted me gone, you would have attacked already," he said softly. The girl's eyes widened, and her blush deepened. She stomped a foot against the ground and hissed louder. "You don't understand. You must leave, and before it's too late." Her warning carried a strange weight. The man felt a chill down his spine, but he didn't move. Instead, he studied her carefully. Her small frame shook not with rage, but with exhaustion. Her claws trembled slightly as if she had little strength left. The growl was a mask, a wall to hide what she really felt inside. The silence stretched again, broken only by the call of night birds. The girl shifted from foot to foot, her blush refusing to fade. She seemed embarrassed that the human kept looking at her so calmly. No one had ever looked at her like that before, like she wasn't a monster. Her tail twitched nervously as she tried to turn her face away. "Stop staring," she snapped, her cheeks burning red. The man only smiled faintly, shaking his head. "You're not as scary as you want me to believe," he said. The words hit her harder than claws could strike. Her blush spread to the tips of her ears. She let out a frustrated growl, covering her face with her clawed hands. For a second the beast vanished, and she looked like nothing more than a lost, embarrassed girl. But then she quickly dropped her hands and hissed again. "You think I'm weak? You'll regret staying here." The man didn't reply, but his gaze softened. He noticed the ruins around them weren't just broken houses. There were claw marks on the walls, and the smell of ash still lingered. This wasn't just an abandoned village. Something had destroyed it. And now, this tiny beast girl was standing alone among the ruins. Why was she still here? Why was she pretending to be fierce? Before he could ask, the girl turned and stepped back into the shadows, her glowing eyes never leaving his. "This is your last chance, human," she warned, her voice low. "Leave, before you see what happens after dark." The man held his ground, his lantern steady, his heart beat faster, but his curiosity was stronger than his fear. Somehow he knew the girl's growls weren't just threats. They were shields, protecting. a secret she couldn't hide. And behind every growl, behind every sharp word, her blush gave her away. Night was falling fast. The forest grew darker, and strange sounds echoed in the distance. The man took a deep breath, ready for whatever was coming. But one thing was certain. This was no ordinary encounter. The growling, blushing beast girl was hiding something, and he was determined to uncover the truth. The night grew heavier around the ruins, the forest sighing with whispers of hidden life. The man sat with his lantern, refusing to move. He could still feel the tiny beast girl's glowing eyes staring at him from the darkness. She had told him to leave, her voice filled with anger and threat. But he had seen the tremble in her claws, the blush on her cheeks. She was not what she wanted him to believe. Minutes passed, long and tense. The man poked at the small fire he had started. The warmth spread into the cold air and sparks rose into the sky. Then came another growl, this time closer. The girl stepped out again, her claws gleaming faintly in the firelight. Her sharp ears twitched as she hissed, "You're still here, human. I told you to go." The man didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled out a small piece of dried food from his bag. He placed it on a flat stone near the fire and said calmly, "You must be hungry." The girl froze, her blush flashing across her face. Her tail flicked angrily, but her stomach betrayed her with a low rumble. She snarled to cover her embarrassment, "Do not mock me. I don't need your food." Yet her eyes kept flicking to the bread on the stone. The man pretended not to notice, staring at the fire. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then, with a sharp step, the girl snatched the food. Her claws almost scratched the stone. She turned her back quickly, shoving the piece into her mouth. The man hid a smile. "You don't belong here," she muttered while chewing. Her voice was softer now, but her tone still sharp. "My clan would destroy you if they were alive." The words slipped from her tongue before she could stop them. The man's brows lifted slightly. So she really was alone. The ruins weren't just empty by chance. Something had taken everyone, and she had been left to survive. "Your clan," he said gently. "They're gone?" The girl whipped around, her blush glowing again. Silence. "You ask too much," she snapped, but her eyes shimmered with something heavy. Pain. She crossed her arms and stomped her foot like a child forced to answer. "I don't need your pity. I survive alone. I don't need humans." The man leaned, back against the ruined wall. His voice was calm, unshaken. "If that were true, you wouldn't still be standing here talking to me." The girl froze, her ears twitching. Her face turned scarlet as she hissed again. "You're wrong. I'm here to make sure you leave. That's all." But her tail betrayed her, swinging nervously behind her. She wanted him gone, yet she hadn't left his side. The man studied her closely, every movement, every growl, every blush. It was clear to him now. Her threats were empty. Her heart wanted something different than her words. The night wind howled through the ruins. Somewhere deep in the forest, a long cry echoed, low and haunting. The girl stiffened immediately, her claws rising. In defense, the man noticed her sudden change. "What was that?" he asked, his tone serious. The girl's lips pressed into a thin line. "None of your concern," she growled, though her voice shook. "You should fear it. But you're too foolish to run." The man's eyes narrowed. He could feel the weight of danger in her words, but instead of leaving, he adjusted his cloak and sat straighter. "If something comes, I'll face it," he said firmly. The girl's eyes widened, half in shock, half in disbelief. No one had ever spoken like that to her before. Her cheeks burned with heat as she looked away. "You're insane," she muttered, her voice almost a whisper. Or maybe just stupid. Still, she didn't leave. Instead, she circled the fire slowly, her claws tapping against the stones. Every time her eyes met his, her blush deepened. She tried to cover it with another hiss, but the more she tried, the more obvious it became. The man, patient and calm, finally asked, "What are you guarding so hard?" The girl froze, her chest rising and falling. She opened her mouth to growl again, but nothing came out. For the first time, she had no words. The fire cracked. Between them, her tail lashed as she spun away. You wouldn't understand, human. You never could. The man leaned forward, his eyes steady. Try me, he said. The girl's claws clenched at her sides. Her ears trembled, her blush spreading like fire across her face. Her secret weighed heavily inside her, pressing to escape. But pride held her tongue. Instead, she shouted louder, Just leave. Don't follow me again. If you stay, you'll regret it. Her voice echoed through the ruins. But when she turned to storm into the shadows, she stopped. Her body trembled as she whispered so softly he almost didn't hear it. You'll get hurt. The man's chest tightened at those words. It was no longer a threat, it was concern. The tiny beast girl's growls were shields, but her blushes were truths. She didn't want him gone because she hated him. She wanted him gone because she feared for him. The night deepened and the cry from the forest came again, louder this time. The girl's ears twitched sharply, her eyes flicking toward the dark trees. Her claws flexed, her tail stiffened. The man rose slowly to his feet, his lantern glowing bright. Whatever was out there, it was getting closer. And despite all her growls and warnings, she didn't run. She stood close, her blush glowing in the firelight. Her heart torn between pride and fear. And for the first time, the man realized she wasn't just warning him, she was protecting him too. The forest was never quiet for long. Strange cries echoed in the distance, carried by the cold night wind. The man tightened his grip on the lantern while the fire cracked beside him. The tiny beast girl stood a few steps away, her claws gleaming faintly, her tail twitching with unease. Her sharp growls had softened now, replaced by silence. But her blush still burned bright across her cheeks, and that silence told him more than any threat could. He took a slow step closer, his boots crunching against broken stones. Whatever's out there, he said firmly, we'll face it together. The girl's ears twitched at his words. Her claws flexed nervously, and her eyes flashed with anger. No, not anger, something else. She shook her head and hissed, Foolish human, you don't understand. You should have left when I warned you. But her voice trembled, and the man noticed her gaze shifting not just to the trees, but to the ruined village around them. Her eyes lingered on the broken walls, the collapsed huts, the burned wood. It wasn't just fear of the forest, it was fear of memory. He followed her gaze. These ruins, he asked gently. This was your home, wasn't it? The girl froze. For a moment her claws lowered, her chest rising and falling as if each breath was heavy. Her tail wrapped around her legs, and her blush deepened until her whole face seemed to glow. Finally, she let out a long, shaky sigh. Yes, she whispered so softly he almost missed it. This was my clan's village. The man remained silent, letting her speak. She hugged herself, claws resting against her shoulders, her eyes locked on the ashes near the broken huts. They were strong, fierce. No outsider dared come near, until the night the fire came. Her voice cracked, her ears dropping low. The predators from the mountain attacked, huge beasts with teeth like blades. They tore everything apart, set fire to the homes and left no one alive. The man's chest tightened, her growls, her threats. They weren't just to scare him, they were shields to hide her pain. He saw it now, clearer than ever. I hid, she whispered bitterly, her blush mixing with shame. I was too small, too weak. I wanted to fight, but they shoved me into the earth tunnel beneath the hut. When I came out, everyone was gone. The fire had eaten everything. Her claws dug into her arms, trembling. I told myself I was a beast, that I didn't need anyone. If I pretended to be fierce, I wouldn't feel alone. But her voice faltered, her eyes flicking toward him. Then you stayed. The man stepped closer. The lantern's light caught the wet shimmer in her eyes. Her blush was brighter now, not from anger, but from something she couldn't control. Embarrassment at being seen so vulnerable. She quickly turned her face away, growling weakly, Don't look at me, you'll laugh, you'll say I'm just a child playing beast. The man knelt down slowly so his eyes were level with hers. I don't see a child. I see someone who survived what others couldn't. His voice was steady, warm, and I'm not laughing. I'm listening. Her ears twitched and her eyes darted back to his. For a heartbeat, she forgot to growl, forgot to bare her claws. Instead, her lips parted slightly in surprise. Her blush spread down her neck, and she quickly turned away again, covering her face with her hands. Why do you say things like that? She stammered, her tail whipping wildly. The man didn't answer, only let the silence speak for him. The crackle of the fire filled the space between them. Then, snap! A branch broke deep in the forest, loud and sharp. The girl's head snapped, up, her ears twitching, her claws rising again. They're here, she whispered, her voice trembling. The man stood, his hand on the knife at his belt. What is it? He asked quickly. Her glowing eyes flicked toward the trees, her face pale beneath her blush. The predators. They hunt in the night. I told you. Staying was a mistake. The forest grew deathly still. No birds, no wind, only silence. The man's heartbeat thundered in his chest, but he held the lantern steady. He looked down at the girl, her small form tense, her claws ready but shaking. You're not alone this time, he said firmly. Her eyes widened, her blush returning, full force. She shook her head furiously. You don't understand. If they see you with me, they'll kill you too. You'll die because of me. But he didn't move. I'd rather face them than walk away from you, he said. The words struck her harder than any blade. Her heart skipped, her breath caught. She growled weakly, but her tail betrayed her. Curling tight in panic, her blush burned hotter than ever, and then it happened. From the trees emerged glowing shapes, red eyes cutting through the dark. Large shadows moved silently between the trunks, heavy paws sinking into the earth, the predators she had spoken of. Their growls rolled like thunder across the ruins. The girl stepped in front of the man, her claws raised. Her voice trembled but carried a fierce edge. If they want you, they'll have to get through me first. The man's breath caught. For all her blushing, all her growls, all her fear, her secret was clear now. Beneath the mask of the beast was a heart that cared. And for the first time, she wasn't hiding it. The forest trembled with the sound of predators closing in, the night about to erupt into battle. But in that moment, the man understood her fully. The tiny beast girl was not his enemy. She was his protector and, perhaps, his only ally in this haunted place. The predators did not strike at once. Their red eyes glowed in the shadows of the trees, moving slowly, circling the ruined village. The man tightened his grip on the knife, holding the lantern high. Beside him, the tiny beast girl crouched low, her claws shining in the firelight. Her growl rumbled through the air, low and steady. Yet even through her anger, her tail trembled, betraying her fear. For long moments, nothing happened, only the sound of the fire crackling and the distant rustle of leaves. Then, as if testing them, one predator stepped forward. Its body was massive, covered in dark fur, its fangs dripping with saliva. The girl hissed, baring her claws. "Stay behind me," she shouted, her voice fierce. The man almost laughed at the thought, this tiny creature protecting him. But he saw the determination in her glowing eyes. She wasn't pretending now, she was ready to fight. The beast growled, lowering its head. The man and girl stood side by side, waiting. But then suddenly the predators stopped, their ears twitching, as if some unseen command had reached them. With one final growl, they turned and slipped back into the forest, their glowing eyes fading into the dark. The man let out a shaky breath, his grip loosening on the knife. The girl, however, stayed tense for a long time, her chest heaving, her claws still raised. Finally, when the silence stretched too long, she let out a sharp breath. "They'll be back," she muttered, her voice heavy. "They don't give up. Not until they've tasted blood." The man lowered himself onto a broken stone, the lantern still glowing beside him. He looked at the girl, who now stood with her back to him, her small shoulders stiff. "You were ready to fight for me," he said softly. The girl flinched, her ears twitching. She turned her face away, her blush spreading fast. "I wasn't protecting you," she snapped. "I was protecting the ruins. This is my home. No outsider will claim it." Her words were sharp, but her voice cracked halfway. The man smiled faintly, recognizing the truth she tried to hide. "You don't have to lie," he said gently. "You stayed because you didn't want me hurt." The girl's claws curled tight, her tail lashing behind her. Her cheeks glowed like fire as she turned on him. You're insufferable," she hissed. "Always saying strange things. Always staring like you can see right through me." Her voice rose, but so did the blush across her face. She stomped her foot like a frustrated child. "Stop it. Just stop looking at me that way." The man chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I can't help it. You're not what you pretend to be." His voice softened. "You're strong, but you're also kind, and no growl can hide that from me." The girl froze, her claws falling slowly to her sides. Her lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but no words came. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Finally, she turned sharply away, crouching near the fire, her tail wrapped tight around her legs. "Stupid human," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know anything." For a long while, they sat in silence. The man watched the flames dance while the girl peeked at him from the corner of her glowing eyes. Every time his gaze shifted toward her, she turned away quickly, her blush deepening. But she didn't leave, and that was enough. Later that night, as the fire burned low, the man lay against the ruined wall. His eyes grew heavy, but he stayed alert, his knife close. The girl sat not far from him, pretending to watch the shadows, yet every few moments her eyes flicked to him. She noticed the way his chest rose and fell, steady and calm. He didn't look afraid, even after seeing the predators. That confused her. No outsider ever stayed this long. No one ever looked at her with anything but fear or disgust. But this man, he stayed. She hugged her knees close, burying her face in them, her blush still hot against her skin. In the quiet of the night, when she was sure he was asleep, she whispered to herself, Why can't I make him leave?" Her voice was weak, almost trembling. "Why does my chest feel like this? Every time he speaks?" The man, half awake, heard her soft words but said nothing. He only kept still, letting her believe he was asleep. And in that moment, a strange bond formed between them, not spoken, not admitted, but real. When dawn broke, the light spread across the ruined village. The fire had turned to ash, the forest alive again with bird calls. The man stretched, picking up his bag. The girl yawned quietly, quickly hiding her face when she noticed his eyes on her. "Don't think we're friends," she muttered, her blush betraying her words. "I still don't trust you. You'll just slow me down." The man smiled faintly, adjusting the strap of his bag. "Then I'll just have to keep up," he replied. Her ears twitched, her tail flicked nervously. She turned away quickly, growling under her breath. But she didn't tell him to leave. She walked ahead, making sure he followed, and though her words remained sharp, her heart no longer felt as empty. For the first time since the night of the fire, the tiny beast girl didn't feel alone, and she hated how much that thought made her blush. The forest was restless that night. The wind carried strange cries, low and deep, like drums beating in the dark. The man and the tiny beast girl sat near the dying fire, their eyes watching the shifting shadows. The girl's ears twitched, her claws already out. Her body was tense, as if she could feel danger, coming closer with every heartbeat. "They're here," she whispered, her voice tight. "The predators never forget. If they see prey once, they return until it's gone." The man adjusted his grip on the knife, his jaw firm. "Then let them come," he said. The girl turned to him, her glowing eyes wide. Her blush burned even in the pale moonlight. "Fool, don't act brave, you'll only die faster," she hissed, but her voice cracked with fear, not anger. Then it happened. From the darkness came a roar that shook the trees, The ground trembled as a massive shape moved between the trunks. 2 red eyes appeared first, glowing like coals. Then the beast stepped into the ruins, bigger than any predator he had seen before. Its fur was dark, matted with blood, its teeth long and dripping. The air smelled of death. The girl's growl ripped through the silence, fierce and sharp. Her tail lashed behind her, her claws raised high. The man stepped beside her, the lantern in one hand, the knife in the other. The predator snarled, lowering its head, circling them slowly. Every step it took cracked stone under its heavy paws. "Stay. Behind me!" the girl shouted, her voice shaking but brave. The man only shook his head. "I said I'd face it with you." The girl's chest heaved, her blush flashing across her cheeks. Her heart raced at his words, but she couldn't answer. There was no time. The predator lunged, its jaws opening wide. The man shoved the lantern forward, the sudden burst of light making the beast recoil for a heartbeat. But only for a heartbeat. It swiped its massive claw, sending the lantern crashing against the stone wall. The flame flickered and died, plunging the ruins into near darkness. The girl let out a furious cry and leapt forward. Her small body was quick, her claws slashing at the beast's face. The predator roared in pain, its head jerking back. But it recovered fast, snapping its jaws at her. The man's heart lurched as he saw her nearly caught between its teeth. "Move!" he shouted, rushing forward. He stabbed his knife into the beast's leg. The predator bellowed, staggering, its blood spilling across the stones. The girl landed beside him, panting, her glowing eyes locked on his. "You're insane," she hissed, her blush burning brighter. "You could have been crushed." He smirked breathlessly. "And you could have been eaten." For a second, even in the chaos, she froze, her heart pounding harder than the beast's roar. The predator shook, its head violently. Snapping the knife from its flesh, it lunged again, its massive jaws slamming into the ground where they had been a moment before. The man rolled aside, grabbing a broken spear from the ruins. The girl darted behind the beast, slashing at its tail and legs. She moved like lightning, her claws cutting deep. But the predator was strong, too strong. It swung its body, knocking her against a stone wall. She cried out in pain, collapsing for a moment. "Hey!" the man shouted, rage flaring in his chest. He ran forward, jamming the broken spear into the beast's side with all his strength. The predator roared, staggering again. The girl forced herself up, her body trembling, her blush mixed with tears. "No," she growled, her voice raw. "I won't lose again. I won't be weak this time." With a scream, she leapt onto the beast's back, her claws dug into its neck, her fangs sinking deep. The predator thrashed violently, but she held. The man seized the moment, driving the spear deeper. Blood sprayed across the ruins. The predator let out one final deafening roar before collapsing to the ground. The earth shook as its body fell. Silence followed, broken only by the girl's ragged breathing. She stood, over the fallen predator, her claws dripping, her chest heaving. The man dropped the broken spear, his body aching, his arm bleeding from a cut. He looked at her, small, trembling, blushing but alive. And for the first time he saw not just a survivor but a fighter. The girl turned to him, her glowing eyes wide, her face flushed red as she saw the wound on his arm. You're hurt," she whispered, her growl gone. She rushed to his side, her claws carefully touching his sleeve. "You stupid human! Why did you fight like that? Why didn't you run?" Her voice trembled and her blush deepened until it reached her ears. The man gave a tired smile. "Because you didn't run either," he said simply. Her heart stopped at his words, her claws tightening on his arm. She lowered her gaze, hiding her face behind her hair. "You're reckless," she muttered, her tail curling tightly around her legs, but her voice dropped to a whisper. "Thank you." The man sat on the broken stone, blood dripping from his arm. The girl crouched beside him, her blush refusing to fade. Her growls were gone now, replaced by silence and a strange warmth. For the first time since her clan had fallen, she wasn't fighting alone, and though the predators still haunted the forest, the bond between them had grown stronger than fear. a bond sealed not by words, but by blood and survival. The ruins smelled of smoke and blood. The giant predator lay lifeless on the ground, its red eyes dim now. The man sat against a broken wall, his breath heavy, his arm bleeding. Beside him, the tiny beast girl crouched low, her claws trembling as she touched his wound. Her glowing eyes were filled with worry, though her cheeks burned red. "You're a fool," she whispered, her voice shaky. "You could have died. You almost did." The man gave her a tired smile. "And so could you," he replied. "But we didn't. Because we fought together." The girl froze, her tail curling tight. Her blush spread deeper as she turned her face away. "I didn't need you," she muttered, her claws carefully tearing cloth from her own sleeve. She wrapped it clumsily around his wound, avoiding his eyes. "I just didn't want the predator to win. That's all." The man chuckled softly, wincing at the sting of her makeshift bandage. "Of course," he said, his tone gentle. But inside, he knew the truth. She cared, even if she would never admit it. For a long while, silence stretched between them, broken only by the night wind. The girl stayed close, too close for someone who claimed she didn't trust him. Every time her glowing eyes flicked toward him, her blush deepened. She wanted to growl, to shout, to push him away, but she didn't. Instead, she sat there, guarding him, her claws ready for any sound from the forest. When the moon reached its highest point, the man spoke again. "Why do you keep pretending?" The girl's ears twitched, her body stiffening. "Pretending what?" she hissed, though her voice was weak. "That you don't need anyone," he answered calmly. Her claws froze on her knees, her blush spreading hot across her cheeks. She glared at him, her lips trembling. You don't understand," she snapped. "Everyone I trusted is gone. My clan, my family. I am the last one. If I trust again, if I care again, I'll only lose it. I can't." Her voice broke and she turned away quickly. Covering her face with her hands, her shoulders trembled, and for a moment her growls sounded less like a beast and more like sobs. The man's chest tightened. He wanted to reach out, but he stayed, still, his voice low and steady. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," he said softly. "I'm here, and I'm not leaving." The girl's breath hitched, her glowing eyes peeking at him through her fingers. Her blush glowed brighter than the fire's dying embers. You're stupid," she muttered, her voice small. "But you mean it, don't you?" The man nodded without hesitation. "I mean it." Something shifted in her then, did in the walls she had built, the growls, the sharp words, they cracked. For the first time since the fire that destroyed her clan, she allowed herself to believe someone might stay. Hours passed. They didn't sleep. Not fully. The man kept his knife, close, his eyes half closed. The girl stayed awake, crouched nearby, her glowing eyes scanning the shadows. But every so often, her gaze drifted back to him. She noticed the way his chest rose and fell, the way he didn't look afraid. It made her chest ache in a way she couldn't explain. When dawn finally came, the ruins glowed golden under the morning light. The predator's body was cold now, the forest strangely quiet. The man stretched with a wince, testing his injured arm. The girl scowled at him, her blush refusing to fade. "You shouldn't move so soon," she snapped. "You'll tear the wound open." He smiled faintly. "Worried about me?" he teased. Her tail lashed furiously and she growled. "I'm only worried because you'll slow me down if you can't walk," she retorted quickly. But the heat on her cheeks betrayed her words. The man stood slowly. Grabbing his bag, he looked at her seriously. "You should leave this place. It's not safe anymore." Her glowing eyes flashed as she shook her head fiercely. "No, this is my home. These ruins are all I have left." Her claws clenched at her sides. "If I leave, it means they really are gone. Forever." The man paused, his heart heavy. He understood her pain, clinging to ashes because they were the last pieces of her family. But he also knew she couldn't stay here. And yet, He didn't argue. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice gentle. Then, I'll stay too, for as long as you need. Her ears twitched, her eyes widening. Her blush deepened until she hid her face behind her hair. You're impossible, she muttered. But her tail curled softly now, not in anger, but in something warmer, for the rest of the morning they walked together through the forest. The man kept his pace steady despite the wound. The girl stayed just a few steps ahead, growling at every strange sound. But every time the path grew rough, she glanced back at him, making sure he was still there. And every time she saw him following without hesitation, her chest filled with a strange warmth she couldn't explain. By the time the sun reached the sky, an uneasy silence had grown between them. Not the silence of mistrust, but the silence of two people learning to walk beside each other. The girl still growled, still blushed, still snapped with sharp words, but she no longer told him to leave. And the man knew. Trust had been born in the fire of battle, a trust, fragile as glass but real, and it was only the beginning. The sun rose high above the forest. The ruins behind them now lay silent, only ashes and broken stone telling their story. The man walked carefully, his injured arm still bound by the girl's torn cloth. The tiny beast girl padded just a few steps ahead, her sharp ears twitching at every sound. Her claws were ready, but her tail swayed nervously. She kept glancing back, making sure he followed, though each time her cheeks flushed red. They stopped, near a stream, the water clear and cool. The man knelt to drink, his reflection broken in the ripples. The girl crouched nearby, her glowing eyes fixed on him. When he caught her staring, her blush spread instantly and she turned her face away. "I wasn't looking at you," she hissed quickly. "I was just watching the water." The man chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You're not very good at hiding things," he said. Her tail lashed furiously and she growled, "Shut up, human." But she didn't move away. Instead, she sat on a rock, hugging her knees, her eyes flicking toward him again when she thought he wasn't looking. Her blush glowed brighter in the daylight, harder to hide now. After a long silence, the man asked, gently, "What will you do now?" The girl's ears twitched, her claws scraping lightly against the stone. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice low. "My clan is gone. My home is ruined. I've lived only to survive. But I don't know what comes next." Her glowing eyes dimmed, sadness creeping into her tone. "I only know how to growl and fight. Nothing more." The man stood, walking closer. "You know more than that," he said softly. "You know how to care, even if you try to hide it." The girl's eyes widened, her blush spreading hot across her cheeks. She snapped her gaze away. "You're imagining things," she muttered quickly. But her claws fidgeted nervously, betraying her. He knelt beside her, his voice calm. "You fought for me. You stayed beside me. You even worried about my wound." Her tail curled tightly and her blush deepened until she hid her face behind her hands. "Stop. Don't say things like that," she cried, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to. I didn't want to be alone again." The man's heart softened. He reached out slowly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Her body stiffened, her ears twitching. For a moment, she froze like a frightened child. Then, slowly, she lowered, her hands, her glowing eyes meeting his. The blush on her face was undeniable now. "You really won't leave?" she whispered. Her voice was so small, so fragile, nothing like the growl she had used before. The man nodded firmly. "I won't leave. Not now. Not ever." Her lips parted, her breath catching in her throat. Her claws trembled as she whispered, "Stupid human." But this time, her growl was soft, almost tender. She leaned closer, her face redder than fire, and for the first time, she allowed herself to rest against him, her head pressed gently to his chest. Her claws relaxed, no longer ready to strike. The man wrapped his good arm around her, holding her carefully. She trembled at first, unused to the warmth of another, but slowly. Her breathing calmed, her tail curling softly around his leg. She whispered so quietly he almost didn't hear. "Thank you." The forest around them was alive with birds and the whisper of wind. But for the girl, the world had gone still. For the first time since the fire that took everything, she felt safe. Her blush was hot and unshakable, but she didn't care anymore. She didn't hide it with growls or sharp words. She let it burn, because it told the truth. She wasn't alone. When they rose again to walk, she stayed closer than before. Every time he stumbled from his wound, she grabbed his arm with her claws, steadying him. Every time the forest grew too quiet, she stepped in front of him, ready to fight. And every time he smiled at her, her cheeks glowed, but this time she didn't turn away. This time she smiled too, shy and uncertain, but real. By the time the sun dipped low again, the ruins were far behind them. A new path stretched ahead. One, filled with dangers but also with hope. The tiny beast girl no longer walked as someone pretending to be strong. She walked beside someone who saw her for who she was. Not a monster, not a survivor, but a girl with a heart that could still trust as the stars lit the sky. She glanced at him, her blush returning as strong as ever. "You really are staying?" she asked one last time. Her glowing eyes searched his face, desperate for truth. The man smiled, his voice steady. "Until the very end." Her chest fluttered, her claws curling softly at her sides. She growled faintly, though it was more like a nervous laugh. "Then fine," she whispered. Her cheeks burned brighter than the moonlight. "But don't blame me when you find out. The beast who growls the most is also the one who blushes the most." And for the first time, she didn't hide. She let her blush shine in the dark, because now it was no longer a weakness. It was her secret bond with him. Her uneasy growl, her soft blush, her fragile heart, all finally found a place. Beside the human who refused to leave.